Welcome everyone. My name is Melissa Tierney. I probably spoke with a lot of you over the phone. Thank you very much for being here. It is an honor to be a part of your day, and my intention for you today is to come out of this room with more information than you know what to do with. I am absolutely available to
You got it. Have a great day.
answer questions and just help you in any way that I can. So I'm here today to talk about how getting older is not a sentence. You should think about it as a strategy. And why is this important? Because aging is diverse. No two people age the same. Health, mobility, cognition, all social needs vary very widely. And with people living longer and often with a little bit more issues than we know about, we also have a lot of resources at our disposal, like community programs and resources, like the YMCA, for example, is a really great resource for health and wellness for people of all ages. We are seeing, on that note, thank you, the biggest demographic shift in the United States that's taking place right now, as more than 10,000 people, statistically speaking, turn 65 every day. And the baby boomer generation, does anybody know what years make the baby boomer generation?
I can guess, 47.
You're close. Close. It's 1946 to 1964. So, the baby boomer generation is reshaping retirement, aging, and housing, and we're going to be discussing this at length, and that's why you're here. So the purpose of this is to empower you to think about your strategy, to empower you to empower others to think about their strategy and create a plan. So below are the topics that we're going to be discussing. In front of you, you have a couple pieces of paper. One of them is going to be some notes that I printed out for you. And at times it may feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. I do tend to go fast, it's just my speed, but you also have an additional piece of paper to write down your notes on, and then behind you on the table towards the back there are additional resources that you can take home with you. And if you need more paper, just raise your hand and somebody from our team would be glad to bring you more. Please save your questions for the Q&A at the end. If you have a quick question, you need me to maybe repeat something, just raise your hand, happy to do that. But save your bigger questions for the end, because we will have a Q&A session, and chances are somebody else also has that same question. So, who am I? My name is Melissa Tierney. Like I said, I'm a realtor by trade. I am a certified real estate planner. I'm the only one in Santa Barbara with the Keller Williams Real Estate Planner designation. It is something that I studied for and I earned through a series of education, tests, etc., etc. Now, in addition to this business setting, and by the way, you're more than welcome to take out your phones and take a picture of my contact information. Many of you already have it, but this is me right here. So when I'm not doing real estate or working with families to build, protect, and transfer their generational wealth, you can find me at the YMCA. I'm actually a swim coach there. I coach my son's swim team, Go Gators, and I'm also the master's swim coach there as well. And by masters, it's just a really nice term to encapsulate the age group of 18 to 100. Anybody who is in that age group is welcome to come. And the only sales pitch you are going to hear from today's presentation is, if you are a member of the YMCA, any YMCA, please come and try my master's swim class. It is free for any YMCA members. Just saying. You can also find me, speaking of pools, you can also find me at Reef and Run on Thursday evenings. I'm one of those crazy people who jumps in the ocean and swims around the buoys. Depending on my mood, I'll probably either do the 500 or the 1,000. Just depends on who's there and if my kids are watching.
Good for you.
Thank you.
What time is that?
That's tomorrow at 6 Yeah. So outside of swimming and being at the beach, I mean, we live in a perfect setting for the beach. So you can find me doing, like I said, real estate, but you can also find me volunteering at the Friendship Center. Has anybody here heard of the Friendship Center?
Oh, yeah.
Good. I'm a volunteer for the Friendship Center, and I also am just now starting my journey as a volunteer at the Alzheimer's Association. So, given this, interesting background, I really, like I said, by trade I am a realtor. That is the only way I make money, is when I transact houses. I am not here to convince anybody to buy or sell a house, but what I am doing is taking my combined experience in the field from planning and my senior transition specialist designation that I earned not just from the Keller Williams real estate planner community, but also when I was an integral part in my own grandmother's retirement journey. I am taking everything that I have seen and done in the field, and I am throwing it out there for you guys to just learn from, take it with you, and hopefully it makes a difference in your life. More on that to come. And today what we're going to cover, we are going to, aging intentionally is the overall goal for everybody. And we're going to, like I said, when we talk about this, we're going to talk about how aging should be a strategy. These are the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the 5 pillars of intentional aging. The YMCA actually asked me to give a talk about this, and I did. It went really well. I incorporated that into this presentation as well. So we're going to talk about the 5 pillars of intentional aging. We're going to talk about emotional decisions and financial decisions and how to really bridge that gap and make collective decisions. We're also going to talk about, and these are very important, this is why you have extra paper to write these down on, activities of daily living and right sizing, and the particulars of those elements here in Santa Barbara. I'm very well entrenched in my role as a senior transition specialist here locally. I've even started my own networking group, which consists of leaders in the local senior space. We get together once a month and we just mastermind over what we're seeing that's successful, what we're seeing that we're having challenges with, and we mastermind around how we can do better. And so I'm very well connected with the senior living options and resources here in Santa Barbara. And actually we have some of those folks here. We have some vendors here at the talk. We have hospice. Who else do we have? So Maritza, can you raise your hand? So this is Maritza. She's from Hospice of Santa Barbara. And we might have some other folks stop by later on during the talk. But this is where, these are the things that I'm going to hopefully just make simple for you guys. We're also going to talk about, because they're not talked about enough, real estate strategies that defer capital gains taxes. I'm going to hopefully demystify wills, trusts, and the probate process for you. Disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I didn't make it that far in school. I made it as far as to get my master's degree in German literature. So I'm not a lawyer. I am not a CPA. I'm not a financial planner. However, we do have a financial planner in the room. You may have met him when you come in. His name is Michael Miranda.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And I'm also going to be talking about, on that note, a little bit about loans and mortgages and how they play a vital role in planning for retirement. And the person for that is going to be Guy Rivera. Guy, can you please raise your hand?
Hello, everybody.
And he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the help of his wonderful wife, Victoria. Thank you very much. All right, so we're also going to follow it up with some estate planning tactics to hopefully help you guys know what questions to ask your estate planning attorneys. So why are we here? We're here because aging is inevitable, but aging well is intentional. Some of you may think, what the heck are you doing talking about aging? You're only 40. True. But I was such an integral part in planning my grandmother's retirement, and here's how we started, and this is a big takeaway I want for you guys. My grandmother was a fierce, ferocious, formidable woman. She worked in aerospace in her career. A big portion of her life, she was a single mom raising 2 kids, my dad and my aunt, both of which turned out to be very kind, productive, and successful human beings. And when she retired, she even earned the accolade of Citizen of the Year through her community. So how do you tell somebody with that level of accomplishment in their life, you can't live alone anymore, it's not safe? That's a hard conversation to have. What does that look like? Well, you know, it's important to know how to start that conversation, and that's what we did as a family. Because while retirement is a very personal choice, it is actually a family affair, and it is best for people who function well together to come together and have that conversation. And so what we're doing here today is 30% of the population, only 30% of the population is actually very proactive when it comes to their retirement. And by proactive, I mean having those conversations, but also choosing health and wellness activities that do emotional, physical, cognitive stimulation for their bodies. And I personally believe that our seniors deserve better. Aging with intention means that you're not drifting, you are designing. And here's how we do that. First, we need to clarify your personal vision. And what we're going to do with that is, if you take the paper that I printed for you with the blue letters on the top, take this paper, and on the back you're going to see lines. This is where you're going to write your vision. Now, when we had this conversation with my grandmother, she was living in Ventura. She was living alone. And there were other factors that were contributing to the fact that she needed to be living in an assisted living community as soon as possible for her own safety. But you can't tell somebody that outright. So this is what we did. We said, Grandma, what's your vision for your retirement? She says, I'm already retired. Well, we know. How do you want to live your golden years? These are your golden years. What does that look like? She says, well, I just want to spend time with my family. Okay, that's a nice thought. Let's expound that. What does that mean? And she said, well, living far away, I can't experience the birthdays, the holidays. I can't do this and I can't do that. Okay, so then what does that look like? It's not a one-word answer what your vision is for your retirement. It's not a one-sentence answer. It's not a phrase. This is what we got out of her. She said, I want to live close enough to my family so that I do not miss another birthday. I do not miss any holidays. I don't miss any celebrations, graduations, life events because of the distance, period. The next sentence was, and I want to be there physically to hold my great-grandbabies. Boom, that was her vision. 2 sentences, but it's full of depth, and it has purpose. And so what I want you guys to do is to take 10 seconds to think, what is your vision? What is your vision for how you're going to live your retirement and your golden years? Maybe there's a family event, a wedding, a graduation, a trip, a vacation, a cruise, something that's coming that you want to be physically and mentally, emotionally present for so you can fully enjoy that. Maybe somebody's pregnant, maybe the family's expanding. Maybe the family's not expanding, but there's still a lot of family developments that leaves room to be enjoyed. And so what I want you to do is use those lines to write at least 2 sentences of what your vision looks like for your golden years. Ready, set, go. Yeah, so then we'll find that for you.
Give you a pen that did not work. I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. Got it. So we can talk about that. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. All right. Now that we've clarified what our vision is for living out our golden years, we're going to keep that. We're going to hold it. And now I want you to think about, how are you going to treat your health like a habit and not a hope? How are you moving daily? Eating colorfully? Sleeping purposefully? Aging well is earned in small circles. Maybe that means joining the YMCA, like I mentioned. Maybe that means going for a walk at the beach. Maybe it means joining a group or a club. Finding another purpose will always add value and will also add to your vision, and maybe can even help you expound on that vision. The next thing we're going to talk about is financial clarity. The goal is not to just avoid running out of money, but to live freely and generously and leave a legacy with intention. This is going to be our biggest topic for today. What's interesting to me is I'm a mom, a single mother, and I can check out a book on how to raise my kids, how to do all kinds of stuff as a single parent at the library, but I can't find a lot of resources on how to help age my grandmother appropriately. They just don't exist. And so there are a lot of questions I have about the environment and how to help people to thrive in different environments, and investing in relationships. How do you invest in a relationship so that that relationship can grow and fulfill its potential? These are all things that trickle into intentional living, and my challenge to you is, how are you going to shift your narrative? You have your vision written down. That's the starting point of how you're going to shift your narrative. Don't just age. I want you to curate your life, and I want you to keep me posted on how that goes. So when it comes to aging with intention, the first part of this is going to be shifting the thinking, like we've already talked about, making consistent choices that support your physical, emotional, and mental well-being. And what that means is before a crisis hits. I get a lot of questions on, well, what do I do about something? As a realtor, I get a lot of questions like, what do I do with my house? I don't want to sell it yet. When is the ideal time to sell a house? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have market analytics. But what I will say to you is, you want to make decisions, especially big ones, when you're still in control. You must make your biggest decisions when you're still in control, and hopefully you have your power team of 4. I call it the family attorney, the family CPA, the family financial planner, who's managing that family real estate. Hopefully you have a power team of 4 that can help you rally and become intentional about taking control of your financial future. So now that we have our vision, like I mentioned, the 5 pillars of intentional aging, we've already written down our purpose and our vision, and we've talked a lot about health and wellness. We're going to dive into finances. We're going to also talk about home and environment, community, and connections. because a lot of people don't think about things in this order. The first, this is where what I want you to write down. You can take pictures of this with your phone. This is where we start with anything regarding aging. The activities of daily living. As we get older, they become a little bit more restrictive. These are the things that we need to pay attention to. This is what your medical staff, anything physical, any decisions that are made on down the road, they're all going to be based on the activities of daily living. Bathing and showering, dressing, eating, transferring from a chair location to another location, toileting and continence. These are all the activities of daily living that people are going to be referencing with regards to any decisions that people are going to be making as they age. Even if, let's say, you're entertaining the idea of moving into a retirement community, you need to be able to match the level of support that they provide as it pertains to the level of support that is needed from the ADL standpoint. Aging in place is a big topic that people bring up because it's a sense of security and independence and dignity. But these need to be at the core of every discussion, especially when it comes to aging in place. Now, has anybody here heard of the term the sandwich generation? Okay, good. So, dating back to 1981, the term sandwich generation was coined by two women, Dorothy Miller and Elaine Brody, and it was primarily introduced to social workers and gerontologists. And at that time, the middle generation in the sandwich was the baby boomers. And in today's world, the adult or the couple has shifted to the Generation Xers, and of course, as time marches on, the sandwich generation will now largely be composed of millennials. So, as carrying demands an increase in time and financial resources, which we will cover, the emotional health of the sandwich generation naturally tends to decline. So, who provides care for the sandwich generation? Well, I have resources for that. One of them is going to be Family Service Agency. They are fantastic, and I know a lot of the people who work there. And there's also going to be centralcoastseniors.org. Write those down, centralcoastseniors.org. Maritza, am I missing any more?
There's two that come to mind.
Who are they?
I know Women's Daisy partners with a local senior, like if you call them.
Moving Miss Daisy, got it. Yeah, I know them well.
If you call them, you'll ask them, I'm looking for resources for placements and independent assistant or skilled nursing with help with.
So on that note, there's also senior placement specialists, senior placement consultants. There are people in town who really specialize in working with families to place a loved one in a retirement community. I have several recommendations that are quite good at what they do. And then there's also, going back to Family Service Agency, there's also Coast Caregiver Resource Center. Cynthia McNulty is fantastic to talk to. They provide counseling to sandwich generation people at no cost. That is the Coast Caregiver Resource Center. Go ahead. And the Center for Successful Aging. Yes, they have a lot of good resources as well.
I'm sure everybody knows there's a whole booklet on aging.
Yep.
Senior resource.
And that's what this is right here.
Yeah.
So, if you go to centralcoastseniors.org, you can also, anywhere that these are printed, you can pick them up for free, but you can pick up this booklet of resources, and it's got everything. So it'll at least help you focus your searches a little bit better. And you're welcome to take a look at this at, when we get up for Q&A.
Melissa, where did you find those?
This I found it in front of the YMCA where they have the independence and I don't know who else distributes them. I think the local library does, but yeah, this was just a free publication
Are they printed monthly or
every year,
every year?
and they just came out with the 2025 version. All right, so the key thing to take away from this is, you know, we've already talked about the sandwich generation, but 70% of people 65 or older, statistically speaking, they will need some form of care. And when it comes to care, falls are the #1 safety risk, because 1 out of every 4 falls in older adults results in some form of needing rehab and care to treat. And they're actually the leading cause of injury and related to passing away for adults 65 or older. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things that contribute to aging and serious health risks within the aging, but the one that's the most dangerous that I have come in contact with is the waiting for a fall, waiting for an event to take place, because people find that they're kind of meeting their status quo as things are, and it's just, well, we're just gonna wait for a fall or wait for a crisis. Well, it's disturbingly common, and a 2022 report by the National Institute of Aging found that over 60% of seniors who ultimately moved into an assisted living or skilled nursing community did so only after a serious injury or some type of an injury took place and not before. So a senior is actually treated in the ER for a fall every 11 seconds, statistically speaking, and every 19 minutes, we lose 1. That sound about right, Maritza? Yeah. So this is just what's reported. Once a fall occurs, it's kind of a domino effect that sets off a rapid decline. So not to get morbid or negative, but I want to shift that conversation. And I want to shift it for caregivers and aging adults. So instead of waiting for a fall to force the conversation, why don't we just be proactive and ask the question, what do we do if? What do we do if something were to happen? If we were to downsize tomorrow, where would we go? What does that look like? Downsizing or moving to a retirement community or transitioning to an assisted living community can actually enhance quality of life. They offer really planned for you and great nutrition, social engagement, easier access to health care, and safe living conditions. And for many people, they can still live their retirement vision, hopefully the one that you guys wrote down, on their terms and in a new place that will accommodate their activities of daily living and not where they wish they would be. So I always say it's better to be 5 years too early than 5 minutes too late. And this is where that last pillar of community and connections come into play. We have the opportunity to prioritize every day our health, our wellness, and what are we doing to enhance that and live it to its potential. You know, we need to really cognitively focus on what can we do today to keep a stroke or dementia at bay, to the extent that we can. So once again, before I get into how much does it cost to age in place, take a picture, write it down. These are the criteria you need to keep in mind when it comes to aging and moving forward. All right, so when we talk about aging in place, the first thing you should ask is, how much is it going to cost? And this goes into pillar number 3, which is the finance portion. Home care is going to provide basic support for your activities of daily living that you wrote down and or took a picture of. Now, when we first started having this conversation with my grandmother, she could still get herself dressed. She just could not lift her arms quite high enough anymore. Her reach was just a little bit less and less every day. So the home care that we hired would help lift her arms up so she could dress herself. The home care provider was not dressing her, she was dressing herself. It was just assistance for that one ADL. And that's where things start to come into play. It's very piecemeal, very nuanced, and it's a supportive role so that they can still maintain their own activities of daily living. When it came to cooking and cleaning, my grandmother was happy to cook and happy to clean. It made her day cook a fantastic lunch and an even more kick-ass dinner. And she did it with style and pizzazz. But what she couldn't do was lift her heavy pots from the cupboards below the sink or below the stove onto the stove and then transfer them into the sink to wash them and then dry them and put them away. That's where she had assistance. The caregiver that we hired, actually I think we paid more like $30 an hour for that. She came in and she helped support her in those functions. So when it comes to the other activities of daily living like cooking and cleaning, they're not going to come in and just clean your house. You have to hire a house cleaner for that. If you need support with an actual role, full on completely, in a home care setting, you have to hire for that specific role, for that specific job, for that specific function. Now when it comes to home health care, this is going to be more medical. If there's a stroke and somebody needs to come to the house and check on you, take vitals, maybe manage some medication, provide some therapy, provide any kind of PT, this is going to be where you need a prescription for it, and the people who will be coming in for it have to have the right certifications, designations, and licenses behind their names. It has to be an approved agency. You can't just hire a friend to come over and expect Medi-Cal to cover it. That's not how it works. It's medical based. Now, when it comes to the activities of daily living, just adding up more and more to the point of, well, you know, I really wish we could have somebody watching mom and or dad or both or senior loved one for more than 4 hours a day. That's where we start bleeding into 24-hour care. And that's going to run anywhere between 20 to many thousands per month, depending on what is necessary. This is also where I see a lot of people, especially after an injury or a fall has taken place, and now we've got medical bills in the tens of thousands. This is where I see people taking out reverse mortgages to pay those bills. Guy, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Reverse mortgages serve a purpose. They have come a long way since the old days.
Mm-hmm.
They're very concentrated just for this, and more active seniors take them out so that they can tap in on the debt equity in their home and utilize and escalate their retirement. I see a lot of that going on right now. But yes, this is one of the main reasons why people take reverse mortgages. It's a loan, you gotta qualify for it, but it serves a purpose and they're great products.
Well, they're not as predatory. I mean, people say that they can be kind of predatory in nature. And when I've worked with reverse mortgages professionals like yourselves, I mean, can you talk about how they're managed and not
Yes,
predatory in nature?
Well, we recognize that seniors are a specialized class, or a protected class.
Yes.
And some of us definitely take that into, really at heart. We have a fiduciary responsibility to do so. And all of the boxes are checked 3 times. Everything's regulated, everything is looked over. You do not fund a reverse mortgage unless, somebody's cognizant, somebody is, you've got to be on your game to actually get one.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot be
So
You
if there are
can't be
any
out
signs
at-
of
I mean,
dementia or Alzheimer's, it's not
None
gonna
of
work.
that. And
Okay.
if in fact you are using a power of attorney, it's gotta be checked 2 or 3 times by our attorneys, by the lender, just to make sure that it's going to the right place.
All
So
right.
there are fail-safes in reverse mortgages that make it a beautiful thing for certain people.
Right, and they are a good option when you have care running at this type of price point. But that will only go so far. It's not a sustainable model. So now what? So this begs the question, when a senior loved one comes to that point in their life, and this is what we ask ourselves as a family, what are the options to keep my senior loved one monitored, safe, and managed with regards to daily living, and with help in the fill in the blank of where they need their support without costing 20 or even 10 grand a month? What does that look like? Some other common questions that people ask. How will I know when it's time to move? What are my living options? What should I do with my home? How can I pass on a legacy right now? When should I start planning? All of that funnels down to when you are still in control. Looking at these options, we have really great options for 55 or older housing, which are communities that are strictly for residents on title to be 55 or older. You're gonna have a lot less yard work, but especially if you're in, like for example, Encino Royale, condominium complex. There's also mobile home parks. I have heard some friends and colleagues of mine live in Rancho Santa Barbara and San Vicente mobile home parks. They love it there. And I've had several people say that San Vicente is the Montecito of mobile home parks. It's a great place to live. I have friends whose parents are there, and they become my friends too. And it's great because you are still doing your own cooking and cleaning, you are still living in your own space, but it is one level. And there is less house to clean, but you're still planning meals and housework. Once we get to the point of not being able to be alone, then we need to start thinking about what that next level of retirement living looks like. That's where we get into an independent living community situation. Now I have to clarify this. In the senior space, we do have our own vocabulary. We don't call independent or assisted living communities facilities. We don't use the F word. And on that note, when it comes to assisted living and even memory care, we don't call sometimes people who are incontinent, we don't call them diapers, they're briefs. There's a whole vocabulary, and I'd be glad to teach you what that vocabulary is in another seminar. There are plenty of independent living communities like Villa Santa Barbara and Wood Glen Hall. Those are going to be the communities where you can come in on a month-to-month basis. It's a monthly rental. You just pay a one-time community fee. I know Villa Santa Barbara, they're much more of a social model. In fact, the executive director was telling me that some of his newest residents, they literally just use Villa Santa Barbara as a landing spot in between all the cruises they go on. Sign me up for that, actually. You are still independent. You are still getting yourself dressed. You are still brushing your own teeth. You're independent. But the difference with living there is the nutrition is planned and made for you. Just order from the menu and they clean it up. There's linens and house cleaning provided, linen service, so they come in and they take your linens, do the laundry. You can still go out and walk, and it's very much you're living on your own. If you need to bring in some care, some therapy or what have you, and it's a very nuanced conversation to have with the independent living community, but they do have those options. there are also, and I have charts here that are not at your tables, but we can certainly talk about. When it comes to looking at which community is right for you, obviously you're going to have to evaluate what your ADLs are and where their specialties are for their preferred type of residences. You're going to want to be in a situation, ideally, where you can gradually go from independent living to assisted living, and then if something happens where cognitively there's some cognitive decline, you can move into an on-site memory care. There's actually a nationwide shortage of memory care beds around the country, and it's very hard to find a memory care community that can provide for all of the needs that are required on a short notice. You want to be in a position where you can just move in. Now, if something happens where there's a stroke or a fall or some type of an injury, that's where skilled nursing, this is called a skilled nursing facility, we call them SNFs. This is where the SNFs come into play. They're going to serve a rehab function for the senior loved one in your life. The idea behind the SNFs is that it's a temporary stay. You can start at an independent living community and where they have everything in one, assisted living, memory care, on site and within the community, within the area. Or you can go from an independent living into an assisted living. Now, I have, so independent living, there are a lot of communities in town that have all of them on site, and those are going to be your San Marcan, Casa Dorinda, Val Verde, Vista Del Monte. Those are going to be your CCRCs, continuing care retirement for the elderly. They have everything on site, and you just move through it like you do. But there are some function-specific communities in town, like Villa Santa Barbara, Woodland Hall. They're going to be your independent living. So if something happens, and they will do everything that they can to keep you there, but if care to support your senior loved one's ADLs becomes too much, then they're going to have to recommend that you go to another community that can provide the support for those activities of daily living. And those can be in the form of a 6-bed. Those are going to be your single family houses that are retrofitted to be senior housing, where they have people coming in with the right designations after their last names to support seniors in their daily living. Now, I have a list that I got from Family Service Agency that has a huge, they've compiled every list of RCFEs, residential care facilities for the elderly in Santa Barbara County. You can take a look at this list, it's right here. And they're going to have a list of every single community in Santa Barbara, who the contact information is, and how to get a hold of them, and what types of patients they support. So I just go down here and it'll give you administrator, phone, the size of the community, and the types of accommodations they have. Are they private? Are they semi-private? Do they support ambulatory or non-ambulatory? Do they provide hospice? Is hospice able to come? Anyway, this is a great list to have, and you can go to Family Service Agency and download this list for free. Now, when it comes to management of these senior living communities, there are a lot of horror stories that get circulated, whether they're fact or fiction. I'll leave that to the judges, but there are resources around in our community that monitor these communities, and that would be the long-term care ombudsman. Their job is to investigate any type of complaints, any type of situation that could prevent the highest of care being provided in these communities. And so I have that information here. where and how to report abuse in any kind of care facility. There's different sections for skilled nursing facilities, any type of facilities for individuals with different developmental disabilities. I have a form right here for reporting abuse. It is reported and it is managed. Now, I know this is hard to read. I can absolutely send this in a PDF so that you can zoom in on it, but this is just basically who is here in Santa Barbara, kind of the bigger names and what they provide and what kind of waiting lists they have. So I'll start at the top. Val Verde was actually, it's a life plan community where you come in and the idea is that you stay there for your life at whatever stage you're at, and then as your care needs increase or decrease, the price that you pay monthly will increase or decrease. The wait list is 3 to 6 years for 1 bedrooms and 5 to 10 years for 2 bedrooms. Going back to the whole planning early concept. Entry costs are high. They have a buy-in. The CCRCs like this typically have a buy-in, and the buy-in for Val Verde is going to be $250,000 for a 1 bedroom, $730,000 for a 2 bedroom. And it's very much ideal for a long-term planning type of family. And people, I do have people who who get on these wait lists and they plan for this. Now, I mentioned Villa Santa Barbara and Wood Glen Hall. These are going to be your independents. There's a one-time fee of $2,500. Studios rent for $400 to $500 at Villa, depending on what you're looking at. Wood Glen Hall has 2 standard apartments available right now. These 2 typically don't have a wait. The month-to-months typically do not have a wait. If they do have a wait, it's maybe a few months. And there's only a one-time community fee. So these are also great options. Here's how one family I know hacked the system. There was a mom, an elderly mother, that her daughter and her family were providing care for, and the daughter and her family went to Hawaii for 2 weeks. And the daughter said, well, I can't leave my mother alone. How can I make sure that she receives her care? Villa Santa Barbara, it was one of these 2, but both Villa and Wood Glen, actually any of these you can ask. Ask them if they offer what's called respite stay. And that is a temporary stay. Think of it as a try it before you buy it. And what they did was they paid for a 2-week respite stay at one of these. And the mom had all her care, she was managed, she was provided for, everything was fine. So the daughter was able to go on vacation with her family and enjoy while her mother was managed and provided for. So again, it's called respite stay. Try before you buy. Now we go into Casa de Rinda. Casa de Rinda is going to be life care. And what's going to happen with that is anytime you go into any of these places, you're going to be required to fill out the physician report 602A. You're going to be required to take a TB test. You're going to have to fill out a services agreement. Prescriptions need to be signed by the resident's doctor. There's going to be healthcare directives, power of attorney, lots of forms and authorizations, and a residential bill of rights. All of those things that go into any of these places. But why I'm bringing it up now, when I mentioned Casa de Rinda, is when you apply for Casa de Rinda, the rate that you pay when you first stay there is the rate that stays with you your entire life. That's what's called life care. Now, Val Verde, your monthly changes based on your care changes. That's called life plan. Life care means they care for your life and the care cost stays the same. Now, Casa de Rinda has monthly rentals and a 5 to 8 year wait list for their monthly rentals. The entrance fees at Casa de Rinda go from $450,000 to $2.5 million, depending on, are you in an apartment, how big is it, or if you're in a standalone villa. And I believe the standalone villas, that waiting list is about 15, 16 years. Again, planning early. San Marcan, there's a little bit more flexibility. They do have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and standalone villas. The 1 bedroom wait list is going to be 6 to 12 months, and the 2 bedrooms probably 3 years. The standalone villas and cottages at San Marcan are going to be 6 to 8 years. This is also a great midlife life plan option with varying levels of care on campus that will increase or decrease depending on the levels of care that are required. Now, Maravilla, there's Maravilla and Vista Del Monte. Vista Del Monte, they actually have updated pricing and availability on their website, so I'm going to just defer to that because it changes somewhat frequently. But Maravilla, they do have a 1 bedroom in their independent living, and they do have a deluxe alcove and assisted living, and their buy-in starts at $40,000. All the units are month to month, but there is a buy-in starting at $40,000 depending on what you buy into. So there's also Alexander Gardens, which is not on this list. They just came up with, it's a much smaller community, but they're an assisted living community and assisted living only. Their memory care community is Villa Alomar. It's a different community, and they actually have an opening, and it's going to be a single room for $8,000 a month, and I believe that's it. I have to take a look. But like I said, if you're thinking about helping somebody transition into something like this, I mean, now's the time to act. Meet with your financial planner to plan for how are they going to afford the buy-in fees? How can they plan that monthly cost in advance? Michael Miranda, would you like to say a few words about that?
Yeah, as Melissa keeps kind of refreshing the thought of get on it early, plan it early, kind of put it into your plan. So the retirement planning concept, I'm going to say it's never too late, 1, and 2, we like to see most people start really in their 50s. But having said that, you know, here in Santa Barbara, due to the wealth that we've accumulated in this generation right here, these baby boomers and the greatest generation, what we see is just this extraordinarily large availability of wealth to fund our retirements. And so I just say, get on it early, get with one of us financial planners that look at your holistic life and help you create multi-generational wealth. You know, of course, we're always going to go from kind of the airline standpoint to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. But, you know, get on it early and we can help.
You would bring up the airline example because you used to be a pilot.
Do you invest in cryptocurrencies?
You can.
Oh boy. So here's the truth. Your health span should match your lifespan. Did you know that only 12% of older adults meet recommended physical activity levels? Movement is medicine. So get one of these watches so you can monitor how many steps you take. Get those steps in. Join the YMCA. Stretch, lift, and dance. But now that we've covered, you know, some of the financial pieces, we're going to move on to the home environment of the aging pillars. Anytime I meet with a family, and I meet with a lot of families, every conversation gets to the point of, well, what about the house? Because the thing is, homes don't necessarily age with you. There's always going to be a rug somewhere, maybe an errant rug that somebody trips on. Maybe there's a step or two that gets a little bit more inconvenient by the day. Shelves get slightly more and more out of reach. Lighting is somehow gets a little bit dimmer every day. But the question is, well, what do we do with the house? Should we sell the house to plan for retirement? And asking yourself the following questions would actually be very beneficial from a real estate planning perspective. What if we rented the residence out for 2 tax seasons and used the income from that to pay for retirement? Then the home becomes eligible to potentially do a 1031 exchange, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Could the income from this rental provide enough capital for our plan? What if somebody in the family lived in this home? Well, I would ask then, well, where is the home? Is the home in the coastal zone? Do you even want to be landlords in the state of California? I'm just gonna leave that there. But the reason why I bring this up is because 1 out of every 3 properties in the United States is actually a rental property. And most of them are owned free and clear by seniors, whether accidentally or purposefully. And we call accidentally because some people have inherited homes or they received a step up in basis on a rental home from a spouse. So that's why I've actually developed this little niche of 1031 exchanges within the senior niche, because a lot of seniors own a surprising quantity of investment real estate. And maybe actually I just did a deal with some clients of mine who also happen to be Michael Miranda's clients. They had an investment property in Tacoma, and they have come to the point where they're tired of being landlords. And I get this question a lot, I've reached a certain point where I'm tired of being a landlord. I'm tired of dealing with what the industry coins as the terrible T's: tenants, toilets, trash, and taxes. It's a thing. So I get this question a lot. Well, I don't want to sell because I need the money. What can I do? And then there's the family piece of what happens if I pass away, and suddenly these kids in the family are going to suddenly be in business together with likely the largest quantity of wealth they have ever seen. How do you think that could go? But there are ways to plan a legacy, and I've got several videos of this on my YouTube channel. But what I want to impart on you guys is, as baby boomers, you're actually in the driver's seat, and not necessarily from a position of having so much equity if and when you decide to sell your home. You can also use that equity as purchasing power. A strategy that I talk to a lot of people about is, what if you take out a home equity line of credit, commonly known as a HELOC, and what if you use that to put it down, a down payment on a single level home? Maybe you use that and rent it out to a family member. We had a client who had a grandkid go to UCSB, and so what they did was they used a HELOC in their existing home, put it down on one of the condos in Store Branch. They rented it out to their grandkid at UCSB, and when the kid graduated, then they did a 1031 exchange. They sold it through a 1031 exchange and put it into an annuity to continue to produce financial income during their retirement. So there are a lot of strategies that involve things like using your equity, but transactionally speaking, when I look at the analytics every month of the transactions here, approximately 40% of the transactions here locally are all cash. That's a lot of money moving in and out of Santa Barbara. So there are a lot of strategies around that, and that's where having that power team of 4, like I mentioned earlier, a family attorney, a family financial planner, family CPA, and a family real estate planner come into play. So after we determine if the home is protected from probate court, well, that's actually one of the first things we need to do. This is where the first thing I do is I need to make sure that we don't have to go to probate. if there's a will involved, that's just part of the process, that a will end up in probate court. Right, Angela? Yeah, okay, thanks. Now, if the home is in a trust, the trust will bypass probate court. But we still need to go through the process of reading the trust, figuring out the trustee situation, beneficiary situation, and we need to figure out who the trustee is that's going to be executing the trust on behalf of the beneficiaries. Now, when it comes to types of trusts, now first of all, like I said, I'm not an estate planning attorney. However, we do have one in the room. Her name is Angela Greenspan. Angela, would you please raise your hand? If you have estate planning questions, you may defer to her. These are just some of the types of trusts that I tend to see in my line of work. Think of a trust as a legal tool for financial and estate planning while somebody is alive. If it becomes testamentary, that means it goes into effect after the person has passed away. Now, when it comes to a trust being funded or unfunded, this is where I see a lot of people getting into trouble, because in order for a trust to be viable, it has to be funded. Otherwise, you're in a car with no gas. And a lot of people go with the do-it-yourself situation online, and they don't realize, or they somehow don't end up funding the trust, and then the estate still ends up in probate court, which means it's going to be expensive. This is why you want a local in-person attorney. I have recommendations for a lot of them, and luckily we have one in the room today if you have any questions after the seminar. When it comes to revocable or irrevocable trusts, revocable can be changed during a person's lifetime. Irrevocable cannot be changed. The only thing I would recommend is, I have heard stories about people having a revocable trust, especially with the number of senior scams that are going around. People with revocable trusts are targets because the trusts can still be changed. Now, when it comes to somebody's cognitive ability, I have heard stories where they did make changes to their trust, and hindsight is always 20/20. The family says, well, actually looking back, we realized that that person made those changes, and if they were of sound mind, they would not have made those changes. So something to keep in the back of your mind if you're dealing with a revocable trust: is there a point in time in which it makes sense to make the trust irrevocable? It's just something to keep in mind. Definitely defer to an estate planning trust attorney on these matters and which one makes sense for your situation. Now, when it comes to a trustee or beneficiary, does anybody know the difference between a trustee and a beneficiary? Bueller? All right, so a trustee is the person who is going to be carrying out and managing the trust. The beneficiary is the person or persons that are being benefited from the trust. Now, can a trustee be a beneficiary? Yes. My parents had a conversation with me that they made me the trustee of their estate. And I laughed, I thought they were joking. They said, no, we're not joking. And I said, well, why would you do that to me? First of all, I have a whole seminar on the 21 responsibilities of trustees, and we'll actually see that on the next slide. But a lot of people fall into this pattern of picking one of their kids, for whatever reasons, to be the trustee of their estate. And especially if there are multiple siblings, that could be, we'll just leave that there, whatever dynamic it is. But when it comes to an estate, I want you to think about who has kids. Okay, I have two. And when I last checked with my kids, my oldest said to me one day, I said, what are you gonna be when you grow up? He said, I'm gonna be a heart surgeon. I said, great. My other one said, I'm gonna be a sumo wrestler or an astronaut. I haven't figured it out yet. Fast forward to 20, 30 years from now, wherever these kids are, at whatever place in life, knowing how different they are, knowing their situations are going to be so different, doesn't make sense to put them in business with the largest amount of wealth they have likely ever seen. And if they argue over something because they have very viable viewpoints on things, one of them's a trustee and a beneficiary, but the other one's a beneficiary. Does that smell like a family feud in the making? Maybe. But that's why I recommend consulting with local fiduciaries in town. There are many. They are great at what they do. Quinn Financial, Channel Islands Financial, Mark Watson Financial, Fiduciary, sorry. Channel Islands Fiduciary, Quinn Fiduciary, and Mark Watson Fiduciary. They will carry out the 21 responsibilities and act as a trustee for the estate. Now, I know this is hard to read. I can send you a copy of this. But these are the 21 responsibilities that a trustee has. And one of the things that I said when my parents told me that I'm going to be trustee of their estate was, if I'm the trustee of your estate, it means you're no longer here. How am I supposed to adequately perform these 21 responsibilities when I'm going to be in my own grieving process? So there's that. But you'll see you have to keep records of accounts, records of debts. You want copies of certain things. You want little details like having the post office reroute mail to the executor and administrator of the estate because you don't want mail going to an empty house. You want to contact employment benefits company. You want to do a lot of things. Cancel memberships, especially the gym membership. They will keep debiting that account. Cancel the memberships. Contact the financial planner. Contact the real estate planner. Manage the distribution of assets. Communicate, educate, and resolve disputes with the beneficiaries. Yes, that is part of the job description. So there's a lot here, and there are resources with professional fiduciaries that can help facilitate this. So once we continue going down that path of exploring the whole what do we do with the home concept, if you decide to sell your home, and we've decided that it is safe from probate court, then we're going to look at what does that look like from the proceeds perspective. Now, every title company can provide the realtor upon request what the net sheet, it's called a net sheet, what the amount of anything, proceeds will be if you sell your home for that designated amount. Now, a lot of realtors use this as a tool to show you how much money that you're going to make, but it's missing, in my opinion, the biggest line item that people need to think about, and you need your CPA on this, and that's called capital gains taxes. So when people come to me and they say, I'm thinking of selling my house so that I can pay for retirement, well, I'm going to start at your capital gains taxes and work backwards from there based on what I think this could be. But I work backwards right away from the capital gains taxes because prior to becoming an independent realtor, I used to work for a brokerage as the director of marketing. And in that process, once the broker got a listing, the process was, it was my show as the director of marketing. I provided all the client communications, coordination of events, client liaison activity, very, very high movement role. Well, once we got the home sold for $4 million, the broker received, they called me first. What is this bill from the IRS for $1.2 million and why do we have to pay it? The broker said, that's not my responsibility. Your CPA should have told you that. So, ethics aside, I refuse to put my clients in that position. So, what I do is I run basic numbers on a spreadsheet, which I'll show you in 2 slides. I then print it, give it to you to give to your CPA, to run it also by the financial planner to make sure it's in line with what the ultimate goal is going to be. And then we can work from there in terms of deciding if it makes sense to sell the home. So, before I get to that spreadsheet, I mentioned earlier there's a difference between emotional decisions and financial decisions, and we're going to kind of bridge the gap. Well, this is part of that. So there are 2 types of properties. There's the one you live in, which is going to be your emotional decision. Now, what makes it emotional is the one that you live in is going to be close to family. Maybe somebody lives with you, but it's going to be an emotional decision. And if you decide to sell it, you do qualify for, depending on who's on title, $250,000 or a $50,000 capital gains tax exemption. But that doesn't mean you're exempt from paying capital gains taxes. The sale of a home of any type is going to be a taxable event. Now, the one home that you do not live in is going to be your investment property. That's going to be a financial decision that you make, and that's going to also be subject to federal and capital gains taxes. Those are, we're going to have different criteria on which we make those decisions. The first thing we're going to talk about when we look at capital gains taxes on a primary residence, we're going to look at not just the capital gains taxes, but we're going to look at the adjusted cost basis. Michael, would you like to say a few words about cost basis?
Yeah, that's going to be a function you're going to want to get with your CPA to discuss. And one of the biggest challenges that we have when we're talking about taxation on the sale of highly appreciated real estate is that how do we determine how much the actual property is worth from a taxation standpoint, or how we're going to pay the state of California and the IRS on our gain. And so that traditionally we can calculate by ourselves in a fairly high level conversation, but ultimately we do want to get your CPA involved in it, because that individual is a person who's been reporting those depreciation and other expenses, so that we get a true measure of what your appreciation will be and how much capital gains tax you're going to pay.
Well, and then there's also, wanting to talk to you about Proposition 19 and if that applies, which it could apply, it could not apply. It just depends on what we're looking at. But what we're going to do is we're going to determine what the cost basis is and see what we're looking at in terms of potential capital gains, because that's very important. Now, when it comes to the investment property, this is going to be a little bit different, because like Michael said, there could be appreciation involved here. And if you're not actively working with a CPA who is a tax planning / strategist type, meaning that they are looking at your depreciation, factoring that into the asset, and making a plan with you and your real estate planner that it makes sense at this point in time to acquire this much real estate to grow the portfolio, that's where you're going to want to really identify what it is, what those capital gains could be, and how to defer them. Not avoid, defer. And again, you want to make sure to loop us in with your CPA on that, because selling a home, like I said, is a taxable event and it does trigger taxes. But if you have smart strategies like doing a 1031 exchange on your investment properties, or maybe you sell your primary and use a deferred sales trust, or if you are doing a 1031 exchange, and I've got a couple of clients who are doing a Delaware statutory trust, we also want to defer or determine what the stepped up basis is at passing, if it even makes sense. these are all conversations that require having a competent power team of 4. And they affect your retirement, and it could be, these are the keys right here to building, protecting, and transferring your generational wealth. So another strategy that I see is when, if we're doing an investment property or we're doing some kind of a 1031 exchange, which I'll get into on the next slide, there is a tool that investors use, or not a tool, but it's a type of loan that investors use called a DSCR loan. Guy, would you please talk about that?
Yeah, those are debt service coverage ratio loans. The only thing that qualifies is the property themselves. If you have a property that has very little that you owe on it, and you're renting it out because you've taken one of Melissa's, great options of living, you can still qualify by just providing the lease on that property. They do not get into tax returns or anything. They're cash flow basis, they're interest only, for a very long time, specifically for income properties. We're doing a lot of those right now, and they're a great product to learn about.
All right, thank you. So here is some math for the more visual learners of why we do a 1031 exchange. Because let's say we have an investment property and the sales proceeds are $1 million. If you don't do a 1031 exchange, we factor in the depreciation recapture, different taxes. We are left with $707,500 of funds available for reinvestment. Now, if we do a 1031 exchange with your power team of 4, these are all 0, and you have, you can't see it because my computer's in the way, 1 million available to reinvest with the 1031 exchange. Now, I have an entire seminar on how that works. I don't have time to go into it here, but go ahead.
So this is real estate. What happens if the house is sold and now it's stocks? Do gains work the same way for stocks?
That's a question for Michael.
Okay, so your question is
Let's say a house was sold and then we went into stocks, let's say a while ago. Does all of this, in terms of taxes, get looked at the same way?
Yes. Yes. And let me just throw in a curveball there. There are so many different types of tax deferral strategies as it relates to investment tools, like self-funds, mutual funds, those types of things, that yes, some of the strategies that Melissa has referred to up here are possibilities, but there's additional ones for investment vehicles, okay? Part of what we're doing here today is to just, like she said, we've got us taking a sip from the fire hose, if you will, throwing a lot of stuff at you. Get together with Melissa and I and Guy to talk specifically, and we'll give you a very specific strategy. We'll wrap this up at the end, but great question.
Yeah, thank you for asking. All right, so I have a case study that I like to share with people. This was a case study of a family that came to a fellow colleague of mine who's also a real estate planner. He happens to be in Hawaii, and he shared this with us at great length because it was so impactful for the family. And essentially we have the 2 parents. The father passed away. The father owned this apartment complex. Together they had 4 children, each of which, well, 3 out of the 4 children have their own children. Only 2 of their children, their direct descendants, lived with them on the island of Hawaii. The other 2 lived here on the mainland in different states. Now, this particular case study went the way the mother directed it to go, which she became an accidental investor because her husband, who owned this apartment complex, passed away and she inherited it. And after sitting down with her and asking her what does she want as an 80-ish-year-old woman, and what does she want to leave as her legacy, we also asked her, if you could bless your children while you're still alive, would you? And the answer was a resounding yes. So what we did was, we got the trust attorney involved, we got the family CPA involved, and the family financial planner, and we put it in a trust. They put it in a trust. And essentially what happened in this case is the trust was able to sell the apartment complex, and the mom was able to gift a down payment for each child on their own home. And so the mom was now spending holidays with her kids in their forever homes that she helped to buy. And she was able to do that through the trust. The trust was able to provide the down payment, and they were able to secure their own homes. And when the mother eventually passed away, they had a sound plan in place. And this is just an example of dispute-free legacy that was left, which is what she wanted. Could this have gone several different ways? Absolutely. There could have been a money gift. There could have been, purchasing of different types of annuities, funds. There could have been a lot of different ways that this could have gone, and we ran those scenarios by her. This is what she chose. So this is where it pays to have not just the power team of 4, like I mentioned, but it pays to have the right people in your corner supporting you, so that as you age intentionally, your intentions for your life come with you, so that you can bring to life your legacy and live it on your terms. So that's why we do what we do, because as I've mentioned with, in the last pillar being overcoming your challenges, is your home helping you to age well, or is it silently sabotaging you? Like I mentioned earlier, 1 in every 3 adults over 65 falls every year. Aging in place is not about staying put, it's about staying safe. So when it comes to making decisions, make the decisions while you're still in control. Develop your power team of 4, meet with the right people to get a plan in place, so that we have answers, or at least some good hypotheticals of, if something were to happen, here's what the result could look like. What does it look like? How does it tie in with the vision that you wrote down on the back of the notes paper? And really what it is it's all about creating your personal aging plan. It's about your aging strategy, and it starts with the vision that you wrote down. So talk to your doctors, talk to your medical team, talk to your family, loop me in on the narrative, and ask me how I can help. I have resources, they're at the back tables. I have resources here you can look at. I would love to meet with you just for a confidential conversation, just to make sure that you have all the resources you need. And then from there we can determine if there's a sale for the home involved. We can talk about that later. It's not relevant right now. I want to make sure that you have the resources that you need, you're having the right conversations with the right people, and hopefully what you got out of this seminar was you have better guidance on what to ask the professionals in your life, how do you guide your family to support you, and how do they get resources to support themselves, because it's a big job and we all need to help each other to do this collectively. So take a picture, if you haven't already, of my contact information. If you have a smartphone, you can certainly scan the QR code and snag an appointment on my calendar for your complimentary strategy session to make sure you have the resources that you need We do have people in the room you can talk to. We have Maritza from Hospice of Santa Barbara. We have Angela Greenspan, an estate planning attorney. And we have Michael Mirando back, the financial planner. We have Guy Rivera, the mortgage broker, and his wife Victoria, who can talk to you as well about different types of loans and or reverse mortgages. And then schedule your appointment with me, a real estate planner, to make sure that you have your power team of 4 and that you are asking the right questions and to get you more resources to continue your journey forward. And that'll be that. We can start our Q&A now. Yes, go ahead.
What do you think of long-term care insurance?
Do you have it?
Yes.
Good. You need it.
Sounds